Welcome, everybody out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation. Today, we have another installment of a reference profile episode, and today I'm joined by the remarkable and amazing Sarah Best. We're going to talk about the adapter reference profile. Very interesting reference profile residing right in the middle of the competing values matrix. Let's jump in and learn more about the adapter. The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
So, John, this is one of our very popular reference profile episodes. We are nearing the end of our reference profile journey, but today, what is the profile we will be discussing?
Well, Sarah, we're going to talk about the adapter, and it is a very unique reference profile. Some would say a little bit of a mystery. We'll get into that a little bit. But of the 17, we've done, I think we've done 13 or 14. I mean, we're getting close to having them all done. And I thought, the adapter is one of three, what we call flexing reference profiles that in our competing values matrix sort of lives in the middle and has the ability to literally adapt and sort of shift and go where they're needed. But we thought it really warranted some additional description and conversation around the adapter. So Sarah, do you want to give us the definition or the description of an adapter?
Sure, John. An adapter is a bridge builder, comfortable with changing situations.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know that as part of our other reference profiles, I have actually shared, we talk about drives, needs, behaviors. The drives, I will oftentimes talk about, the dominance being high and the extroversion being here and patience. That's the unique thing about the adapter. If you look at an adapter pattern, their factors, dominance, extroversion, patience, and formality, are right tightly bundled around that midpoint, which is why they're called an adapter. And it's no mistake that the icon for the adapter is a chameleon. So this is where you've heard us use the term situational. Well, this is actually a reference profile that is situationally situational. And let's talk a little bit.
That's a lot of situations.
It's a lot of situations. So part of it is we have some special notes or a special note on adapters. So let me share that, and then perhaps you could share some strengths and common traps and how to work well with them. But
good.
Adapters have a similar amount of each of the behavioral drives. Okay, they're all grouped around that midpoint, and there is no predominant drive that really fuels this person's needs or behaviors. Sometimes adapters can show up as being so neutral, it is impossible to sort of get an understanding of where they are on a particular topic or a particular thought or anything else like that. They're like right down the middle. So that's what makes them very unique. So Sarah, but there's still strengths and that come with that. So share with our group, our audience, more about the strengths and common traps and how to work well with them.
Well, we know that they're versatile.
Right.
They can do a lot of things a lot of different ways. They can go fast, they can go slow. They can take charge and be on the team. They can be very diligent and disciplined, but also have some flexibility. They can be introspective and private. They can also be extroverted.
Right.
Takes a while to figure them out, doesn't it? We also find them to be empathetic. So there is a sense of compassion or awareness of others, and they're bridge builders. So they will probably easily take into consideration two very different ideas and kind of naturally go, well, why can't we meet in the middle? Like, where's a happy ground there? So when we're talking about common traps, they're hard to read. They be very situational. And so what they do one day will be different than what they do the next day. And it's kind of this either communicating clearly their thoughts or not. And when not communicating, actions they may choose or take can be sudden. And so that idea of when they're quiet versus when they actually communicate what they're thinking, for adapters, it's beneficial to communicate the thought process so people don't have to guess.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah. And in terms of how to work best with an adapter, take time to learn how they are. And, each person is a whole person, a head, heart, briefcase, and baggage, and all the
Mm-hmm.
good stuff. So we can't better understand a person unless we take time to ask questions and learn more deeply about them, motivations, and preferences. Because even though their factors are around the midpoint, they may, in fact, based on their experience and their adaptation, they may prefer certain elements that are helpful for a colleague or a person to know. Because they're so flexible,
Mm-hmm.
there's really no pattern that you can trace. No hard like you and I, John, our patterns are evident to the whole entire world.
Right.
Mine
Right.
probably more so than yours because my pattern's wide, but it's kinda hard to figure out really what motivates them situation to situation.
And would you say people are, I mean, I think for adapters, and remember, we're talking about in the context of the Boss Hole Chronicles, what if we had a
Mhm.
manager that was an adapter? So people that are looking to this manager are might maybe not able to pin down like one emotion or drive one way or the other. It's very much again down the middle, and that can be frustrating for people. I mean, just
Yeah.
from a standpoint of like, well, are you excited about this or are you not excited about this?
Right.
You and I think, kind of need that confirmation.
Yeah.
It's like, tell me where you are on this. And it's like, oh no, yeah, it's good. Oh yeah, but it could also be bad. And it's like, I don't understand that.
Right.
And that's kind of the world of the adapter. They just sort of live in that middle ground.
Well, John, I know you have firsthand experience and even conversation with people around what it's like to be an adapter. Can
Yeah.
you enlighten us on that?
Yes. And well, the one thing that's really interesting is because we can measure self concept, which is a person's perceived need to adapt. It's interesting. You'll see an adapter's self pattern right around the midpoint. And then you see this wild adaptation taking place in the second one. And
Mm,
so it's proof that they have this capacity to sort of shift where needed.
yes.
But I've also had adapters say they don't like being adapters
Mm,
because the perception is that they are so situational. It's like I don't stand for anything or I don't, and this has nothing to do with like a person's like moral fiber or their,
right.
what their principles are, their core values. That's not this at all, but it's like I mean one that said, I don't like being an adapter. I want to be able to show up as something more definitive. And it's like, don't diminish what your natural wiring is,
Mhm.
because you have some very unique capabilities. And I think the superpowers of the adapter, much like the altruist and also the individualist, is
Yeah.
that ability to sort of shift and migrate and the ebb and flow of helping people in many different areas. I think that also becomes their kryptonite. I think
Mm,
they find themselves spread so thin in so many different directions, they don't feel like they can land on one particular thing,
yeah.
and that's what's been shared with me also from adapters. It's like anything that's purely my own, I'm all over the place, and also I don't like being so situational on everything or people seeing me as so situational, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I bet too, if you're known as the adapter on the team, and it's pretty rare, right? The adapter pattern is not as common as many of the other reference profiles. Is that true, John?
Go ahead. You go.
We're
I'm
gonna
gonna
ask
find
that
I'm gonna
while
find
you
that
pull that slide
shit,
up.
I usually have that up all the time. It, it's a little bit that's true, Sarah. It's about 4 point just slightly less than 5% of the human population,
Okay.
4.98% based on our current statistics, which is kind of statistically in the middle of the 17 reference profiles, but it's on the low side. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, and knowing that, I think a frustration for an adapter could be that people like to throw them at everything because
Yeah.
they find them to be adaptable and willing, perhaps, and eager to try different things.
Yeah.
So their needs vary. Certainly, their behaviors are very flexible. John, can you tell us how do we motivate and recognize the adapter manager or direct report?
Yeah, and I'm going to sound totally ambivalent about this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So, our guidance on that for motivating and recognizing is to balance private and public recognition. just to understand that they may have a preference for one or the other. And knowing that actually would be really good. Recognize where their behavioral flexibility helps lead to success.
Yeah.
So, what they may perceive as a frustration, if you can frame that in a way to help them realize that it can help you be very successful, that's a way to motivate and recognize. And then finally, reward their ability to flexibly build relationships with different types of people. Now, interestingly enough, when we did our work on change readiness, and for anybody that's interested, we have a couple of episodes on change readiness. Sarah and I did some work around change champions, change challengers, and change catalysts. Adapters are one of the catalysts. I think it's like 14% of the human population between the adapters, the altruist, and the strategist, that they're really good at helping to facilitate change. For change champions that are ready to initiate it, and then you have the change challengers that have to sort of receive it and deal with it, and then eventually become the change implementers. Adapters are really great at helping to facilitate that. So I think that's another way to highlight and recognize some of their unique gifting, where sometimes they may see it as a bit of a downer, that I want to be a maverick, or I want to be a specialist or something. It's like, no, embrace these unique qualities that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we give them feedback? How do we provide direction? What do you think?
Well, it would be helpful for the adapter if we specify what part of their behavioral elements we need. So just because a person is adaptable, they may be well suited to do different things,
Mm-hmm.
but what's the balance we need? So do we need a faster pace and a higher attention to detail for this project? Do we need more collaboration and more strategy, for example? So
Mm-hmm.
giving very specific direction about, hey, which levers do I need to push on more to be successful in this project is super helpful.
Yeah.
And clear expectations are always, well, they're always helpful. Clear is
Yeah,
kind, says Brene Brown, but clear expectations for what behaviors equate to success. And honestly, that's one we should put on every reference profile episode. Clear guidance about what the expectations are.
for sure.
And then lastly, help them understand who they'll be working with so they can prepare to flex their interpersonal style accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're going to hook up with the maverick to do the project and a captain and a persuader, you better batten down your hatches and hold on, because we're going to start moving pretty fast and checking the boxes and generating action. And the opposite could be true if we were working with more stabilizing patterns like guardian or operator, that the pace will be a little more predictable and the details more evident
Yep.
and plentiful.
Yep. Yep. That's good. That's good.
Right? Yeah.
Well, let me share with you. We always talk about also how to delegate and to coach people.
Yeah.
When it comes to delegating, really just lean into their ability to be very flexible. So work that requires or allows them to be entirely flexible is great.
Hmm.
Where you probably want to avoid delegation, where the work itself requires a very specific style on an ongoing basis. So adapters, while they can adapt a lot, if you try to force them into a very specific corner for a long period of time or particular role, they may find that frustrating, or they may find it, somewhat limiting. So a high degree of detail or high specificity over a long period of time,
Hmm.
that may be a bit of a challenge. And then when it comes to coaching, help them understand the reputational aspects of being balanced. They may need to express what they like or don't like so people understand them much better. So that's articulating that, or being a bit more transparent about what they do like and what they don't like, I think is really helpful. That communication part is essential for them, and encouraging that, making it safe for them to communicate that. Spend time discussing the behavioral requirements of the role, and help them show the tendencies at the right times so that they are successful. So that adaptation may need a little bit of guidance of when to pull this lever or when to back off this particular characteristic and play to their strengths. I think that's true for all of our recommendations for coaching, but letting them moderate between the aggressive risk takers and the detailed executors. So, what I think may be frustrating for adapters is their interaction with others.
Mhm.
So, as a manager, as a coach, just simply helping to help them manage those relationships. And that, of course, I think is where we would definitely leverage the tools within the PI platform, like the relationship guide. If being hard to read is one of the characteristics of an adapter, and by the way, adapters out there, this is not an indictment. I mean, you probably would I mean, they probably would acknowledge this, but
Yeah.
helping others understand that and that it's not a liability and it's not a reason to start as you would say, start creating stories.
Mhm.
It's why we do the reference profiles. It's why it's so essential, whether it's adapter or one of the other 16, that we know this about each other because then we focus on the data and not the drama. We start to take the stories out of it and
Mhm.
understand each other for the way we're wired. So
Yeah.
coaching them is going to be a little bit unique.
So, some key takeaways that I learned today would be definitely take time to get to know the preferences of the adapter because there are
Mhm.
some. They just
Yep.
won't be evident when we watch them work. And that's probably true of anybody, but definitely spend time to get to know them and
Yeah.
ask them about the preferences. And I think, based on what you were just sharing, behavioral expectations
Mhm.
of the role, and especially if they're extreme, like it's a lot of diligence and consistency. Maybe it's a project versus an occupational hazard for them, but if that behavioral adaptation is going to potentially be taxing, we got to help them understand what behaviors we're looking for. And I
Right.
was trying to think of good examples, John. An example I can think of is, for this work, I'm going to need you to double check every data entry.
Mhm.
If that's the expectation for this work, I want you to focus more on conversations with people, in person conversations with people
Yeah.
versus emails or text, like very specific behavioral things. Would you
Yes.
agree?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I would also say for our managers that happen to be adapters, realize that if any of your direct
Oh,
reports have very or extremely wide patterns,
yeah.
that coming to that understanding or coming to an understanding of those differences is going to be challenging, and vice versa. If you have a manager who has a very to extremely wide pattern, and you have an adapter on your team, I've had this happen too, where the manager says, "I just want them to get excited about something. I don't sense any passion. I don't sense any fire." And I said, "Well, you won't. Look at the
No,
data.
no.
Look at the data. Don't make them wrong because they're wired differently than you are."
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this. You have to be able to coach and guide and develop them in a way that they understand, not in the way that's comfortable for you.
Yeah. And I was thinking, John, as you said that, if we think about our competing values matrix, we have
Mm.
cultivating patterns. So for an adapter, sometimes it's going to be more about the people.
Mhm.
In the exploring quadrant, it's going to be more about the action and the forward facing momentum and the strategy. In our what we call our producing quadrant, it's really more about diligence and getting it done,
Yeah.
like moving, taking action, but doing it with great emphasis on correctness and accuracy. And for those stabilizing quadrants, that's the last one.
Mhm.
It's about consistency and steadiness. So, because an adapter can push and pull and move into all four quadrants, being very specific about what they need. And if I'm the manager, I also have to know what those people who live in those quadrants also need to hear from me.
For
So,
sure. Oh, yeah.
great way to wrap it up.
Way to wrap it up. Um, I just had a thought. Let me ask you this. I wonder to what degree when we talk about head, heart, and briefcase,
Mhm.
we always talk about, the briefcase, a person's knowledge, skills, abilities, credentials, experience, and everything else like that. I mean, that is no predictor. That's not a predictor of performance. It just is, what's their background tell you about them.
Right.
I wonder if with the adapter, if the briefcase doesn't provide a bit more direction
Mm.
about where to leverage their capabilities more so. And,
Hmm.
and, and so what I mean by that, if we have somebody who has a briefcase that is heavily influenced or built around process and data and specificity and precision, does that provide some guidance for a manager to say, you know what, I think that process and precision, when we talk about the competing values matrix, this may be an area to really truly leverage the whole person. I'm not
Mhm.
sure.
Well, it's definitely worth exploring when you're considering an adapter for a position
Yeah.
who, if the briefcase aligns with the requirements of the job, the question I would want to ask is, does this bring you joy? Like,
Yeah.
do you like doing this stuff?
Yeah.
Because adapters can do a lot of things. And as we've often said, John, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
That's
Like,
right.
it may suck the life out of you. And we'll just assume that that's individual by adapter person.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This is good. And we're getting close to the end of the reference profile series. So keep listening in, everybody. Share
Yeah.
these with your people. Just share them with your managers and your direct reports, because this stuff is so absolutely impactful. I mean, you cannot escape the drives that we all have, and the fact that we can measure them is really powerful. So go into the
Mhm.
show notes, get your reference profile one pager by completing the behavioral assessment. Take you less than 10 minutes and we'll send it to you.
That's right. All right, friends. We will see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.